You guys asked for it. It is finally here, and I cannot wait to show you guys this potion crafting system. I've done a lot of homebrews here on this channel, enchanting systems, combat overhauls, lots of stuff. But one of the biggest requested things has been a potion crafting system. Herbalism, potions, poisons, all of that stuff in one system to be able to truly be able to concoct and homebrew. Ha! Wow, that just led right into that. Your own potions at your table. And a big picture note here is this system, along with many other systems that I've done, has a simple version that you can implement very simply, no crunching numbers, super simple. And then there's other things you can add on to that, and you can choose which pieces you add on to make certain systems or the whole system more complicated and customized as much as you want. So in this video, I'm going to do a walkthrough of those 3 simple steps so you can get an idea how you might want to implement something like this at your table. Maybe this becomes how you run potions entirely as a dungeon master. Maybe it's just one special NPC that has special customized brews, or maybe one of your players takes it and runs with it too. Timeout. As usual with a lot of my homebrew systems that I make videos on, I want to give you guys this whole system so that you can take it and run with it and make it your own. But if you don't want to have to do a lot of the legwork and a lot of the number crunching, me and my whole team have spent over a year on this thing collectively to get it to the spot where it's at. And if you want it straight away, I'm going to be showing lots of different clips of it so you can truly have it and use it at your table. But if you want the PDF for yourself and all the advanced options, all of the tables, all the charts, the full system in entirety, it also has about 30 pages of homebrew resources, DM tools to be able to make your games easier. I give my patrons this each and every month. It is the #1 way to help support what I do here on this channel. And this potion PDF is only available during June and July over on Patreon. Then it's gone, and it will be available on my website. Both those links down in the description. Now let's get to brewing. Step 1 in crafting a potion is probably what you guessed it, gathering the ingredients or the reagents, whatever you want to call them. I'm probably going to say ingredients, but gathering these things up to be able to have the supplies to be able to create the potion. In order to do this, you need a set amount of time to then perform a gathering check. What's a gathering check, you might ask? It is basically a survival check, but I don't want to pigeonhole it into a survival check because survival can mean lots of different things. And I could see someone proficient at survival and living off the land and all this kind of stuff, but a very different person being a gatherer. Very simple. They just know what kind of plants to look for, all the different stuff. So you can customize and create your own gathering check in whatever way you want. In general, this would be your wisdom modifier and your proficiency bonus if the character is proficient in it. They could also choose this at character creation. If a player is really interesting in this gathering type of system, they could totally be proficient at this and just choose that. I would almost like a tool proficiency, like a leatherworking tool, lock picking tool, some sort of tool proficiency. I would totally let players be able to choose this instead. And I'd also I could totally see an argument made for an intelligence-based gathering check and being able to know the land and where certain things are. But I definitely would usually default put this on wisdom and adding your proficiency bonus for this gathering check. But also another quick note for intelligence. Intelligence is based on investigation. You know what I'm saying? Like rooting through stuff. So I could totally see it being there too. But now here's the handy chart that we're going to go through right here. If you roll a 1 through 5 on your gathering check, you don't find anything. I think that's pretty fair. Okay. Maybe on a natural 1, you could find something poisonous, but then the player would know it's poisonous, and that's very meta. So I'm going to leave that alone, but you can take that and run with it for what you want. 6 through 10 is you learn something helpful about the local regions and something maybe about where to look for specifically. You could maybe reflavor that as the next time they roll, and maybe they have one additional resource, so you could give them advantage or something because they spent some time learning it. But in general, I don't like to give advantage for low rolls. So just throwing some options out there. So basically 1 through 10, you don't get anything. Maybe you get some information on the 6 through 10, but at 11, there we go. We rolled over a 10. You get something. You find 1 regent, right? There we go. And then 16 through 20, you find 1d4, and then it goes up 1d4 for each of the 5 increments. And at a plus 30, you're going to find 4d4 regents. Oh, and before I forget, the amount of time it takes. How long does it take? In general, I would say this would be half of a long rest type of thing. They go out and they search for 4 hours or something like that. So in general, I like to block it off in times of long rest. So if somebody wants to do this, most of the time they're going to be spending, a section of their long rest to go out and do this thing. So I really do like to have, I call them resting rolls. So the 8-hour long rest, half of that, 4 hours, they can go and explore and search around, and I give them 1 check to be able to do this one thing. That's in general how I run it off. But if you want to have it only be 1 hour and they can perform it during a short rest instead, and instead of taking a short rest, they can go gather and stuff, cool, awesome, that's fine. Now, what do you do with these regions? Hold on. We'll get to that in a second. An advanced option that I do have here that I'll just briefly talk about real quick is there are flawed Reagents and sublime Reagents, where you can find a broken petal of something and it's just not as much and you need multiple of those, or maybe it has a little bit weaker effect, or you find like a pristine version of this thing and it has an even more boosted effect, or you can not be advanced with it like that and just keep it normal and you find a Reagent. Cool. And we'll get more into what kind of Reagents there are in a second. Again, I'm trying to stay general for these 3 steps and then I'll explain a little bit more. So step 2 now, we are going to prepare and or experiment to be able to find what concoction we're going to do to make this potion. This is basically the in-between step. Step 1 is gather it, and step 3, obviously, I mean, you could have guessed it, it's actually crafting the potion. But we're in this middle spot now where we need to prepare the ingredients. Maybe we need to grind up the ingredients down. Maybe we need to get something else. Maybe we have to lay them out in a certain way, put them in a certain order. However advanced you want to be with that part, the players might have to know a recipe of some kind. And just like a spell recipe for knowing how to make a scroll or inscribe a scroll, I did that in my enchanting system, but they need to know some sort of recipe to be able to perfectly do it. Or not. They could experiment and they could have certain things that they know they have certain properties, certain ingredients that they find, which again, we'll get to in a second, certain ingredients they find that they know do something. And what if I took this ingredient and that ingredient and combined them? I have no idea what would happen, and they could play with it. And this system completely allows you to play with it, which is my favorite part of this system. Is it can be very structured and you can give recipes, and here's the recipe. I have the stuff, I prepare it, I make it, I know what I'm going to get because I've done this enough, or whoever made the recipe has done this enough. But there's also room for experimentation where I know this ingredient does this and I know this ingredient does that. What if I combine them? And this is where there's just so much creativity on both sides, Dungeon Masters players, to be able to create stuff that I've never thought of. Me and my team have never thought of. We have things in place for you to be, here's in general what they do, and I can't even, we'll get to this in a second. We'll do some random examples. That'll be fun. Now for step 3, it's time to actually brew this thing. We have the ingredients, we've prepared them, we're ready to experiment or not, and we are going to throw them into the pot and do our thing. So what does this look like? This is going to be an herbalism check. Could be the same thing as a gathering check. I have separated them from a gathering check and herbalism check. I have those be differently. I think there are characters out there that would be good at both. Cool. But I do think there are characters out there that would only be good at one or the other. Maybe in your group, you've separated those between 2 different characters. I think that would be awesome. One person is this like maybe ranger type character that's out and looking through the forest and finding all the stuff. Maybe it's a druid type character. Cool. And then the other character is more, maybe it's an artificer that loves potions and brewing. Maybe it's a druid that loves potions. Who knows, right? And you could go off the meta and maybe it's a fighter who loves whatever, right? Those 2 separate checks I have be separate. They are not just survival checks. I think that's a little bit too broad of a use of survival for something that is a fully fleshed out system. And again, everything I said towards gathering checks and the customization there could definitely apply towards herbalism checks too. Wisdom or intelligence, I could totally see that. I could maybe even see dexterity as far as but I think this is more about the brewing of it and less super accuracy with your hands. So anyway, you're going to be making this check, but what's the DC of the check? That is a question that I purposely want to leave up to you guys. And that might sound like a lazy, like, oh, y'all guys figure it out, good luck. But this system is so open and up to creativity that in general, sure, a DC 10 would be, you know, something that's simple that they've done before. A DC 15 would be something that like, okay, this is a potion. Maybe they haven't made it before. I'll get into a list of like different things that help you slide up and down. In general, I stay in the by 5s chunks because it feels like it's more fair that way. But in certain situations, I will pull out a 13, 14 or a 16, 17 or something like that. But a 20 would be a powerful potion that you never have had before early on. But then later on in the levels, as you're a higher level, 20 wouldn't be that difficult. So this is why I do not have, purposely so, I do not have this potion is this DC, that potion is this DC. Because if they're doing stuff, it could be anything. So here's a list of different things that could increase the DC. This could be your first time making the potion, so the DC would be higher because you've never ever done this before. And if you're experimenting, you might not even know if this is going to work at all in the first place. You might not have prepared the ingredients correctly. Or maybe you're attempting to craft this in like a hodgepodge type of way out in the forest. You don't have like an actual setup to do it. The DC could be lower if you're in town in an actual alchemy shop and you have everything perfectly prepared. All your ingredients are prepared. Everything looks nice. But if this is some sort of hodgepodge last minute thing, or maybe you're rushed on time, maybe you have to do it quickly and you don't have a lot of time. All those things could raise the DC. But now let's lower that DC. That's a little shout out to the beginning of this channel and my old catchphrase. But anyway, maybe you want to purposely spend extra time. You have more time to spend, and instead you say something along the lines of, I want to spend my entire long rest to do this, or I want to do this during downtime or something. The DC could be lower during downtime. Maybe to make this certain potion, it's 20 normally, but it's 15 during downtime. Maybe you have help making this potion, someone who knows what they're doing, helps you in the process to be able to get everything where it needs to be. So a potion that might be crazy, might be out of your mind. This would be a lot to try this out. Maybe that would be a DC 25 or something. And maybe they've tried it before and it didn't work under unideal circumstances. But maybe they go to a city, they prepare their ingredients, they spend a full section of downtime, they find a local herbalist in some way that can kind of help, and they employ to help them a little bit. And that DC drops from 25 down to 15, maybe even, and now they have a real shot. But a big, huge note here, I should have said this sooner. If the check fails, the reagents are used up and there is no potion. Now, maybe you could flavor this if there's multiple failures, or if there's a lot going into this and they still failed and that feels bad and they did all this setup and then they failed. Maybe in the analogy I just gave, and they went to a potion shop and they have a thing and they spent so much time and they still fail. That could feel really bad. In those moments, maybe give them a little bit of information. Maybe the person NPC that they helped along the way noticed that actually, you know what, I think you put them in the wrong order, or give some sort of narrative flavor to the whole thing that might lower the DC by 1 even, just to give something to the player. And I've done this before. I have a whole DC system of different ways to do rolls. Maybe the DC, let's just say, is 20. And then with that failure, man, maybe I did. If they learn something from it, like you're narratively describing, maybe the DC now becomes 19. Or instead of having that failure be it, maybe successful checks at this thing can lower that DC more and more. Or maybe once they've made 5 of this potion, the DC drops by 5. Once they've made 10, it drops again. Because eventually, if you know how to craft a potion, then you know how to craft that potion. And you just do the thing and it becomes a habit and becomes super easy to do. Unless for whatever Dungeon Master reason you have, it's an unstable process and maybe the ingredients are unstable, or sometimes it doesn't work and it's always a high check. You can keep that in control on your end if it's some sort of very powerful potion that you don't just want them to be able to infinitely make. But also as a Dungeon Master, you can make sure that those ingredients might be harder to find, which now brings us to ingredients. So there's the 3 steps of how this system works, but the ingredients play a big part in that. And this is now where some of the advanced things come in. I have a whole environmental biome with over 10 different regions, and each of those things have different things in them. Different ingredients come from them. Those ingredients have different properties. So there's one table that I have as a Dungeon Master, and maybe the players do, maybe the players don't, and they could learn this over time, but in general they don't. I have this table of what things are where, and maybe I want to play it at that complex level of certain ingredients are in certain places. So the different terrain types have different type of ingredients and all the different properties. I can control and make that as complicated or less complicated as I want. You could also do a much more simple system and just have ingredients be ingredients, and then maybe there are certain powders and stuff that you add to the mixture to have the different effects, and you can separate the effects from the ingredients and just have it be powders that you can pick up. And there's a bunch of different powders and you can just concoct it, but you still need to go gather the ingredients for the base plant type stuff to get. But I'm only saying that because I do want to make sure it's user friendly enough to where you could have a very base version of it, or you could do something like this. Because the next thing I have here is a different types of ingredients, with each ingredient having a different effect. So the first one I'm going to show here, this is a specific homebrew ingredient called Snapdragon. Snapdragons are hard, quickly growing flowers with brightly colored drooping petals collecting around a long-tailed stem. And this is, again, this example is something you might only say to the players once, and then you can just have it as your notes. It's really quick. Gladiator soldiers and guards are often eager to get their hands on these potion tonics to make Snapdragon stalks and petals. The properties of this thing is damaging effects. Very broad, and again, you'll see what I'm going here in just a second. The biomes you can find this in are in the forest, grasslands, or savanna. Those last 2 things are the most important things here because there is a property that each of these ingredients have and where you can find them. So another one is Kepper salt. Kepper salt has a description of these midnight crystals that glisten harshly in midday suns and all this other kind of stuff. But really the property is cleansing and buffing effects. And you can find these in desert or mountain subterranean areas. So now I want you to think of right now, what kind of potions could you concoct with Snapdragon and Kepper salt? What kind of things would damaging effects and cleansing or buffing effects do? In general, I'm thinking of 2 right now. Damaging and buffing effects is you could drink a potion that gives you a buff of damage. wow, that's awesome. Instead of drinking a potion, maybe Snapdragon alone can drink a potion for a damaging effect of a fire breathing breath or something like that, combined with some other effects here that you probably might need to do to be able to control it in some way, right? But anyway, and maybe if you just take Snapdragon damaging effect, you just take damage, and maybe you need to combine other elements and other herbs to make sure you don't die drinking it, right? But you could combine the buffing effects and damage effects to buff yourself with damage, or cleansing. Maybe you have some sort of poison. Maybe Kepper Salt and Snapdragon could cleanse poison. Snapdragon being damage, cleansing being removing the poison. And maybe it's not just the poisoned condition, maybe it's just poisoned or necrotic lingering effects. Any sort of lingering damage you take, maybe a Kepper Salt Snapdragon potion cures that. And then I'm looking through my list here because I knew there was another ingredient that would be better for this, and this is why I love the system so much. Poxel Cap is known for their poisonous auras that are very array of dead and decomposing animals, etc. The properties are toxins, poison, and debilitating effects. The biomes, forest, swamp, and subterranean. So maybe you could try to make a anti-poison from a Snapdragon and Kepper Salt. Maybe the DC would be higher because those aren't ideal ingredients, and the DC's 5-notched higher because of it. And instead, though, if you just got Poxel Cap, and if you just took the Poxel Cap, and maybe you could try Poxel Cap to come up with a cure, but Poxel Cap is about toxins, poison, and debilitating. Maybe if you combine Poxel Cap with Kepper Salt, there's the cleansing. So you get the Poxel Cap to target the poison, and the Kepper Salt cleanses it. Oh my gosh, but maybe the order of that matters. If you add the Kepper Salt first, it maybe wouldn't work as much because the Poxel Cap, they'll get cleansed from nothing and then poison themselves. Oh no, you know what I'm saying? And you can just absolutely run with this. I hope you see the excitement that I have here with this system because it's so open to being able to just take and literally run with it in whatever way you want. This is why I made this section an advanced part, because specific ingredients having certain properties and found in certain locations and stuff is a little bit more advanced, but I think it's worth it. I think it's really cool. Whether you implement this as an NPC that has cool ingredients, or a player wants to really take this and run with it. So if you really do want to take your potion game and this whole system to the next level, check out the PDF on my Patreon or on the website if you're watching this too far into the future. It is one of the favorite things that I've made. I actively have used this myself. It is really fun, and hopefully, as you see, customizable to be as complicated or least complicated, and even the potions are customizable as you want. And just y'all picking up these PDFs helps support what I do here, and not just me anymore. It's a full team of people, artists, writers, creators, editors that take this and really to make it as next level as is. This system would not have been as amazing if just I made it, or just Nexus made it, or just Scott. Any of these people that have been a part of this whole process is because of the support on Patreon and other places that I've been able to bring in people to be a part of this team, to be able to take this stuff even further. Like the next level supporter, MVP, most valuable patron of this video is Kirby. Kirby shows up all the times in live streams. And speaking of live streams, I am now doing weekly live streams every Thursday night. Put it on the calendar. Timeout. Future Dungeon Coach here. Originally in this video, I said that I was moving my live streams to Thursday night, and that's crazy because that's Critical Role. And I'm crazy for even thinking about it. As soon as I finished filming, I realized, and I was like, nope, we're sticking to Wednesday nights. So Wednesday night, or every week, Wednesday night, 8 o'clock, 8:30, somewhere in that time spot. I'll settle that in. It depends on putting the kid down and stuff. But 8 o'clock Central Standard Time, every Wednesday. Let's go. But I also want to thank all of the other people that do show up to those live streams, all my patrons that have supported for a long time now to be able to have this whole thing going. It's been absolutely crazy. I hope this has inspired you to help you brew up your own concoctions at your table and let your players run with it, or maybe keep it secret behind the table and let yourself run with it and create some own potions. And even just looking at these potions gave me some idea. Like the process of going through and creating the system was like, ooh, what if I combine these things? That'd be a crazy potion. And it's all this creative process that helps us to stay creative and think outside the box. Peace.